You're listening to the SKYLIT Books podcast. We're an independent, general interest bookstore putting great reads in the hands of people in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. Hosted by resident Skylighters, we're here to bring you new and exciting author conversations, group reads, and bookseller chats. Happy listening.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host, Mike Jeffrey. SKYLIT Books is an independent bookstore located in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles, California. We're open every day from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., and we also offer online shopping and curbside pickup through our website, skylitbooks.com. And you can find a schedule of upcoming events on there as well. It's my real pleasure today to welcome Bud Smith onto the podcast today to talk about his novel, Teenager, which is out now from Vintage. Bud Smith works heavy construction in New Jersey. His story, Violets, which I love, appeared in the Paris Review. How are you doing today, Bud?
I'm doing real good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Really our pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. And you're going to read something from the book?
Yeah, I'll read something from the book. Sure.
Awesome.
Okay, so this is from Teenager. This is chapter 5. So we're a little bit into the book. This is page 29. It opens up with a escape from a juvenile detention center, a double homicide, and now Kody and Teal, they are on the run a bit. They are driving into the New Jersey Pine Barrens, home of the New Jersey Devil. They grew up over there. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. It's a great book about the Pine Barrens by John McPhee. It's wonderful. A lot of people like his other books like Oranges and so on. I love the Pine Barrens most. I'd read that.
Is that what the hockey team is named after too, then?
It is.
That's cool.
It is. Yeah, the Jersey Devils, yeah. So chapter 5 of Teenager. They were pulled farther into starlit trails, dragging deeper from civilization. Sorry, I messed it up already. Let me start it over. This is chapter 5 from Teenager. They were pulled farther into starlit trails, dragged deeper away from civilization, navigating slowly around puddles and fallen trees, feeling tinier like a gulp of blood, floating freely down a vein, going, man, I don't know what my problem is today. Mr. Michael Jeffrey, let me start one more time.
Yeah, as many times as you just need, Bud.
No, I usually don't need anything. So chapter 5 from Teenager. They were pulled farther into starlit trails, dragged deeper away from civilization, navigating slowly around puddles and fallen trees, feeling tinier, like a gulp of blood, floating freely down a vein, going on forever, reducing still to the size of an atom, shrinking to a particle, subatomic, invisible to the naked eye. They prayed to be overlooked in the grand scheme. The moon was fat and heavy and had no idea what Kody and Teal had done, what they'd seen. It was just the moon. It shone on their path just as clear as ever. Good thing, too, the headlights were so dim. Kody pulled the car into a meadow. They'd rough it that first night in the car. He didn't want to bother with setting up a tent, all the things that would come with it. He knew they'd fight while setting up a tent, all the poles, all the stakes. They couldn't fight right now. He lit a campfire, dragged logs over. They warmed themselves before the low blaze. He relaxed and took in deep breaths of wood smoke and the pleasant reek of pine. He couldn't contain his optimism. Now this is just perfect, Teal. Perfect. I'd love to live in the wilderness again. Again? As far as Teal knew, he'd come from a trailer park on the side of a major highway. There were scraggly woods behind the park, but Teal couldn't imagine anyone ever calling them wilderness. Yeah, he said, live in the wilderness again. And do what? Be wild. He sat cross-legged on the ground, staring into the fire. He tossed a small stick in her direction, and landed on her blanket. She didn't notice or pretended not to notice. It was getting complicated. Finally, she said, I don't like this. I'd rather be somewhere luxurious. He said, we're still so close to the big cities. Look how small the sky is. Pretty soon it'll be so big, it'll just rip us up into it. I paid attention in school, she said. The sky is this big anywhere. You sure? I know for a fact. You'll see. You'll see. It'll be very romantic. An owl began to hoot. Her parakeet Winter flinched in his cage. The gunshots had made the parakeet loopy. Teal asked for specifics. Where were they headed? What would they do? Kody thought it was great that she was thinking of the future, because then that meant there was a shot at getting loose from their past. For starters, he said, I want to be near you for every heartbeat I got left. One heartbeat, a billion heartbeats, whatever it is. Me too, but all you said was big sky and the word west. No need to worry. He began to tell Teal what they would do. It was simple. He wanted to kick open the door to their dreams, get them into the wide open spaces such they had never seen, away from New Jersey, out into the places where the air was medicine and the pale trembling stars were pills of happiness, where enormous trout were carried down from melted snow-capped rivers, frigid, mountain peaks looming mauve and miraculous, where train whistles screeched at midnight and the wolves of midnight howled along, where Kody and Teal would wake at dawn and break the wild horses of dawn, where blizzards were biblical and they would wrap themselves in bearskin to survive. After the thaw, they'd have great stories like all survivalists had, where the summers were crippling, but you knew for sure if you were living or dead. It'd been impossible to tell if you were alive in those suburbs. But what exactly are you getting at, Kody? He said, we're going to be cowboys. He waited for her reply. None came. Kody told Teal the best news of all. He decided it was final. He slapped his knee. We're officially headed to Montana. He'd put in the application weeks ago. He already had the job. He was sure of it. He'd give himself a new name there at the ranch, and so would she. They'd work at this ranch. Hard work, yes, but meals provided, running water, all the sunshine a person could stand. She said, sounds like you got it all figured out. He said, we're on our way to Montana, the big leagues. But first, let's peruse this country. We'll never get another chance. She let that settle in. The days and nights between here and the job are ours, jewels to enjoy. Yes, that's what we'll do. We'll taste the Rockies. We'll swim with crocodiles. We'll ring the Liberty Bell, all that. Alligators, she said. What now? There's no crocodiles in this country. Right. He ran his fingers through her stupendous hair. She had more hair on her head than anybody else he knew. She had enough hair for 2 or 3 other people. Teal began to blubber with grief, and he took it in stride that the shock had worn off. He took her in his arms. Soon she was crying in his lap. He soothed her, pet her head, and couldn't help but think of better days when they'd been erotic, and she had done things on his lap other than cry. Better days. To break the grim mood, he said, I wish my guts glowed in the dark. So if you look down my mouth, you could see my heart, even if the night was starless. I want to go home. Home? Yeah. Everywhere in America is your home. Please, she said. Before long, she was asleep. Kody moved her gingerly into the Lincoln. He took the photos of her mother, Mimi, out of her purse. He took the photographs of Arturo out of her purse. He placed her mother and father into the fire.
Thanks, Bud. That was great. That was Bud Smith reading from his novel Teenager. And it was great. I, just finished this book a couple days ago, and then I reread Violets as it was like my introduction to you. And it was really funny because I could locate and remember the exact moment I became a fan. Like I remember it was summer 2020, lockdown in its heat, and I'm like at my parents' house in Rhode Island, just like, bored reading the Paris Review. And there's this sentence very early on in that story, and it's do you know about being on the lam? It's not too hard. You pay in cash, sell your wedding rings, drive the speed limit, don't go anywhere people rumble, listen to Benjamin Franklin, early to bed, early to rise. And I was like, that do you know about being on the lam? I was like, I love this casual, direct address of the reader. And that features in Tyrant as well. And I wonder if that had always been, something in your toolbox as a writer, or how you came to that, because you have these like big poetic flourishes and this like naturalness between the characters. But I love, we can hear you speaking to us, the reader, like kind of breaking the fourth wall. And I wonder how that ended up in your work.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, I didn't know you weren't supposed to do, I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that stuff until I started. I didn't go to school for college. I'm not proud of it or anything. I just worked construction, and I would read, and I would, watch as many good films as I could. And as I got older, I started getting more involved with going and seeing readings and stuff in the city. And even then, I still didn't know you weren't, there wasn't a bunch of stuff you weren't allowed to do, or you weren't supposed to do in writing, let's say, until I had small press for a while. I published a bunch of people. I got more involved in editing and stuff like that. And then I'd met enough people who had complained about their MFA programs and like the
The University of Iowa story. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. Where they were like just so mad at their MFA programs and their people they went to school with. And some people started saying to me, "Why don't you teach a workshop?" So I was like, "All right." I didn't know how that was, so I wrote to my friend Ben Laurie, who lives there in Los Angeles. One of my favorite writers, genius, that guy. And I said, "How do you teach a workshop? What is it? I've never been to one." So he kind of explained it to me, like how it works with a round table and giving critiques and stuff. And then I started, for the first time in my life, I started being around writing critiques. And this was just a few years ago. This was like maybe like 2 years before the pandemic. So 2018, I think, is when I started doing this. And I started hearing students like critique each other on like all the others laundry list of stuff you weren't supposed to do. And I was like, oh wow. I didn't I didn't know you weren't allowed to address the reader and stuff like that, or you had to be like really careful with it. And yeah, so I was like, oh my God, okay. And certainly people learned a lot of other things, but that was my first exposure really to seeing like, the list of things that have been done terrible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Bad by other people for too long that now you're not supposed to do it anymore. And I was just like, I don't really care about any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like if there's a rule and if it, feels like a stricture, then there's almost always going to be value in kind of like, giving it a middle finger, right? Like, and I think the other thing about workshops is the goal is not to like, you know, um, prove that your story works around a round table with other writers, like I like to imagine that writing can reach people who aren't sitting at those tables. So
Yeah.
I love the direct address. I'm a big fan of it. I think you use it really well, and I'm glad that people telling you it was a rule didn't stop you from using it.
No, I don't think anyone should do that. If you hear something you shouldn't do, and it's something you feel naturally drawn to do, just keep doing it. Eventually you'll get better at it. To the point where, it's like what Bob Dylan said. I'm not comparing myself to that genius, but he's just like, it was too late. They couldn't get rid of me. I was already in the door.
Yes.
It's like, I feel like the things you do naturally as an artist, you probably were kind of doing them when you were a kid already, just at like an undeveloped level. And then the longer you had the experience with it, you just, not that you got, and honestly, not even that you got particularly better at it. It's just like you've had the experience, and it just becomes part of your DNA, something you sit down and do, and it's yourself.
For sure. I like that you brought up like the childhood element too, because Violets is a story about being on the lam and committing insurance fraud, and Teenager is very much a novel about being on the lam out in the world. I'm sure you're tired of people telling you it reminded them of the movie Badlands, but it did, which is a great one. And I kind of wondered what the attraction of the life on the lam was for you, and why you feel pulled to it as a subject.
Well, I'm not tired of talking about that at all. I kind of think that whenever somebody compares something you've made to something else they love, I think that's beautiful. And I remember when I first saw Badlands, I was like 15 or so. A very formative movie to me when I was a kid. I grew up down the street from this video store, and I just remember walking in the video store, and it was VHS and rent two get one free, and just diving really deep into, once you've already seen all the main stuff that's on the shelves that they have, you start digging in the boxes of just the plastic folded up cardboard boxes into like the new Hollywood section or something. I think that's where I found that movie. And it was just like, it was just amazing. What a person can get away with as an artist. And like, because they do it boldly. So Badlands is a really bold movie, and I was really interested in that story, Starkweather story, because it's become like so retold by so many different people in so many different angles that I wanted to throw my version of it into the hat of the American misunderstood myth of these things we keep copycatting.
Yeah.
So anyway, your question though was being on the lam. Like why don't, so Teenager's a story about these two lovers on the lam, young lovers. And Violets is a story about some slightly older lovers on the lam. Most of my stories these days have been just obsessed probably for the last 10 years. I just writing about people breaking away from their lives and the things that are containing them in a little box and getting some personal freedom. And so these two stories just happen to be about criminals, which I don't write a whole lot of stories about criminals, but these two are. And yeah, I mean, after you commit a crime, what do? You know, right. You go on the run. So it's kind of like, unless the crime hasn't been discovered yet, I guess. But, you know, you go on the run and it's cops and robbers and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but,
it's fun. It's fun because it's like this isn't you know, washing the dishes and getting lost in your head kind of novel. It's like things are happening. There are so many events in this book. And we're on the move, and you know, there's dark stuff in here. There's murder, there's kind of desperation, but Kody and Teal are so much fun to be around, and they kind of, even though they're in a stressful situation, they seem to be enjoying themselves. And you have such an exuberant language in this book, that it's a fun book. And I wonder if you have fun while you're writing, because there's certainly excitement in there, but I know that writing is often not fun. So I'm curious if it's sometimes fun, if it's always fun. I picture you standing up when you're writing. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, no, I'm sitting down, but but like sometimes in very short moments of sitting, a lot of this was written on my cell phone, texted to myself, little, you know, the first drafts of it. And then of course, obviously, like anybody else, you know, you sit down and retype it all or work on the laptop and edit it that way. But yeah, I mean, the book reads like it's fun because I think because of the subject matter, it's dark, but like my whole point of writing it was seeing the world even after this terrible thing happens. You're at this age where like you get your first freedoms. And you finally, and you know, unfortunately, the parents had to get murdered, but you get away from your parents, and you finally can be yourself for the first time. And so that's where that exuberance comes from. That's where that joy comes from. It's like, you know, I mean, everybody I know is aware of the fact that they're going to die. I've never met anyone who's like, no, actually, I'm immortal. I'm immortal. I have a friend who was telling me recently that he was at a party and was talking to someone who was convinced that they're young enough now. I think they're like 21 or 22, that science is going to advance enough that it'll be able to keep up with his aging process and be able to correct it. And he'll live to be 500 or something. He'll live to be like one of these characters from Genesis or something.
Yeah.
Book of Genesis.
Methuselah, who you reference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, honestly, everybody I've ever met, they knows they're going to die, and they know they have a limited time here on earth, but yet somehow they still find the joy in it. So that's the kind of book this is. I mean,
yeah,
believe me, I'm sure I'll write my miserable ones.
Hell yeah. I can't wait. I was thinking of, you know, reading this. I'm always looking for like, you know, the cousins of the book, you know, in terms of style. And I was thinking of Cormac McCarthy, just because we're in deserts and there's horses, and the exuberance reminded me of like Scott McClanahan, and like the poetic stuff a little bit of like Sam Pink, you know, like the realism but with flourishes. And then that Joy Williams novel Breaking and Entering, which is set in the Florida Keys, and it's a couple breaking into houses. But I wondered who you think of, like who you were reading when you were first writing this book, and then like if there are any books you think of as like this book's grandparents, you know, like the important ones that this one was kind of feeding from, maybe.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for that list of comparisons. All those writers you mentioned are my heroes. You know, awesome. Scott McClanahan, Sam Pink's writing, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Cormac McCarthy, of course, like I think like his novel like Suttree and Child of God. There's amazing novels, and can definitely do worse than being compared to those authors. So thanks. I'm always gonna, I'm gonna sit down and someone's like, this book reminded me of that Ziggy comic strip, This is like that Garfield. It's like Garfield. No, but I love all those authors you mentioned. When I was writing Teenager, started as a poem. I had to write it I got to a poetry reading, one of these poetry readings in the city. One of the writers hadn't shown up. And the person putting on the event saw me and was like, "Hey, will you read for like 10 minutes?" And I was like, "Oh my God," there was no cell phone reception in the place. So I wrote the poem on like a napkin.
Oh my God.
That became the outline for the book. But I mean,
That didn't happen. Come on.
no, it did. But like, and that poem wound up in one of my poetry collections called Everything Neon. Cool. But it's like, it's not like the material is the most original thing in the world. Like I said, it's already based on just shoot your mom and dad. We've been doing that for a long time. But anyway, so like, what, I got the first drafts of the novel. It started becoming a long short story. It changed into like a novel. And eventually it became like I needed to read things to understand how to do things I didn't really know how to do. I thought like brutality, especially. I didn't know a lot about how to write a really gruesomely bloody thing,
Yeah.
So I wrote to Gian and I asked him what he thought, and he put me in touch with Blake Butler, who gave me a list of like some disgusting novels he loves. And I read some of them, and yeah, that was helpful. I think I read Child of God.
Yeah.
But I honestly, I didn't really think that book was very gruesome. It has like necrophilia in it, and it's it's like a Faulkner novel. It's like, it's, I guess it's gross if like you just look at it on like the surface level, but it's really like a funny novel. It's like it's that way Faulkner does humor, kind of.
Yeah.
It's just like bumbling around. This guy's bumbling around in like caves and coming out and having sex with dead bodies. But but yeah, so I read some gruesome books, and I read Dennis Cooper.
Yeah.
The Sluts, which is
love
amazing.
Love that book. Yeah.
Everybody should read The Sluts. It's amazing. His work is incredible. I'm always like reading his books like at work or something. Someone's like, "Hey, what are you reading?" I'm like, "Oh my God.
Don't ask me that."
Yeah, don't worry about it. They'll like see me read. One time I was reading Beloved by Toni Morrison at work. And the guys were like, "What is that, a romance novel?"
Only if you I'm not even gonna make the joke. Not a romance. Yeah.
Not a romance novel.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was trying to see like what I was missing out on, and the gaps in my reading. Like, and I wanted to start reading some of the best books supposedly that were ever written that weren't like,
canonized.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wanted to read like, so I started reading like Ulysses, and I had 18 other books that I was reading while I read Ulysses. Like I'd read one chapter Ulysses and I'd read a book, and I'd read chapter 2, read a book.
Yeah. That's a good way to go through that.
Yeah. And it was great. I learned so much, and like, I just thought it was cool, man. I just had a great time. But the other books were like, like Hamlet, Macbeth. Read a bunch of like Waiting for Godot and Malloy, and some other read the modernist, a lot of the modernist stuff like Virginia Woolf, Lighthouse, and Mrs. Dalloway. So I was reading a bit of everything, just trying to see where
the possibilities. I think that's what the modernists show you, really.
And that's where I think a lot of the possibilities of Teenager kind of come from. It's like you're kind of reading and it kind of floats away here and there.
Yeah.
It's just finding the emotion of the scene can kind of control the writing. Writing can kind of float off with it.
Speaking of brutal books, I wondered if you read any Eugene Martin, just because he was a tyrant guy, and he's like one of the most like controlled and brutal writers who's like not really that well known, but he had that book Firework on tyrant, and then another one called I think it was called Trash, that was also a necrophilia book. But he's like so intense, but I like him a lot. I don't want to talk all day about him if he's not your guy, though.
Well, he's not my guy yet. I own all those books, and I'm like I have this like never ending list of like things I want to study and learn from, and I'm just excited and he's one of those writers who have people revere. So I bought them, I have them.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping I keep living.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I get to like experience these things. And it's the same way with filmmakers and stuff, and even bands. Like
For
I'll
sure.
go so many years where like, even with bands where I'm kind of like, oh man, I love the Rolling Stones. Like how basic is it to love the Rolling Stones? But it's like, I find the longer I live, I can appreciate different specific albums they did and deep dive on them and get new things from them and like really finally understand them. Like, I don't know. It's the same way with authors. Like,
Yeah.
the thing I knew about that man was when I was working with Gian on Teenager in like the very, very early stages, we didn't really get, we didn't get too deep into much of anything. I would just kind of turn it in, and the book was under the contract, and it was like, it needed time. I needed time just to keep writing it and working on it. He had read like my previous two books, and I think really wanted to work together on the next one. But the books he had read were autobiographical. He had read my memoir Work, which is out of print. Hoping it comes back in print one of these days. And he'd read my novel F-250.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just write about pretty much my life, and he really wanted to work on another book. And then I gave him this thing, and it was like complete this fictional fantasy thing, and he was into it, but I needed to finish it because I'd only given him like a little sample at the beginning of it. And anyway, so the thing that Gian would talk about with Eugene Martin was how he would retype his novels. I think he told me that Eugene had retyped Firework at least 7 times.
Yeah, I believe it.
Like just print it all out. I don't know how he did it, but sit there and retype it. And I was just like, damn, I guess that's how you do it, huh?
I had a teacher, Justin Torres, who's great. He wrote that book, We the Animals, who gave the same advice. He was like, this is how people wrote novels before word processing. So there's something to it. So just do it.
Yeah. I started doing that. And I started doing that with all my work. And I just saw I was happy with my work before. And then I saw when I started doing that, unfortunately, it becomes a lot better. Remarkably better when you retype it a couple times.
Truly, because nothing's gonna slide by. Your eyes can't just gloss over something that's actually not working.
And that's bad news.
You feel it when you type it out again. You're like, that is bad. That's gotta go.
Yeah, it's bad news for the writer too, because it's like, oh no, now I really see what I have to do to get my work up to the level where I'm happy with it now, and it's. Hey, listen, it's a great problem to have because I love to do it, but
you take on a lot more dread though.
I found that no, it's actually less dread, because it's like I dread a lot of my early books. It's like I thought I was done with it, and then they're small press books, so the publisher takes them on, and you're like really excited that someone's gonna, developmental edited, copy edited, all that stuff. And then they're just like, no, it's good. And which is, hey, listen, whatever. But then the problem is I'm like, it comes out and I'm just like, fuck, man, I know it needed to be copy edited. I know it needed like 3 more rounds of edits, and like, it just never happened. But anyway, so maybe some of that stuff's changed for me a little now that I'm retyping everything. Unfortunately, all the extra work, the work that I enjoy, it kind of takes care of a lot of that. But then when you hand it into the publisher now, like this book actually got rounds of edits, which I'd never really experienced before.
How was that process?
It was amazing. It was, I can stop now. I'm happy. I'm like just so thrilled that I got to do it.
Cool.
I always wanted to like take a deep dive on a project I worked on for a long time with someone. And I got teamed up with amazing editor there at Vintage. His name's Todd Portnovitz, and it was amazing. And kind of found like the opposite I thought would happen happened. I was like, no, I'm gonna have to like tone this down and censor, but soften it. And I found it was my thing was the opposite. It was kind of like, anyway, so poked at it, and I got to go a little farther and deeper with things that I thought were kind of like messed up or whatever.
The last reading note that I had going through this book was I wondered if I got some Unabomber vibes from it, just from the living out in the wild, trying to like detach. And there's an interesting thing you do here where it's like when the first, I don't know, 100 pages or so, a couple times I asked myself, like, is this novel set in like the current moment or where is it? Because it's like, and then like a cell phone appears, and then later on there's like some cultural references that kind of like place us in time. But it struck me that like Kody and Teal, like one of the things they're trying to escape is like a very technology mediated life. And I wondered how much of that you were thinking about, like trying to escape from devices as part of like what's motivating them, or something that you feel that you wanted to put down in a novel.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions about this, probably in not in the phase that the book was published in. And early on, some editors were kind of like asking me questions about it before it got to vintage, before it got to Gian with Tyrant. They were like, when is this book set? You need to like define it, because it seems like this time is like a slippery thing, and like it's all the times. Like, why does this girl love Elvis, and where's the cell phones and all this stuff? But I wasn't really so much interested in too much of that. But I will say this. I remember this is the early 2000s, and I remember this time period because I was this age. I was 18. I was 18 in 2000. I was graduating high school. So I thought of this as like 2002 maybe. And it's like some of the kids then, if like you were a kid and you were like, you weren't really fitting in with your peer group, like what music do you like? And what's your like cultural references? And it's like weird shit that you picked up from your parents or like a cousin or an older brother or someone who was also just not really connected to what was going on right now. You're like not part of society really. You're in like, especially these like in suburbia, there would still be these people who would just like, I would know them, who like they're into just big band music or something. And they don't play the trumpet or anything. They just go home and like their dad blasts, Glenn Krupa or something all through the house every night. And so you'd like get in someone's car and they'd be like, oh, check this out. And it'd be like this weird music where you're like, why are you listening to this? Like, this is insane. Like, don't you like Pearl Jam or something? So I knew these kids, and I think they'll kind of always exist. And those are the kind of kids that this book's about. It's Kody is just, he doesn't have any friends. He loves to read Don Quixote, and he's a weird little kid, and he doesn't like music. He can't really wrap his head around it, and he's got this girlfriend who loves Elvis because his mom had this big crush on Elvis and kind of never really. And Teal, of course, holds this delusion that maybe Elvis Presley could be her real father because her own father is abusive. And they're just from this different, demented part of the world, suburbia, and it's not that odd to find people who are just not into what's on the radio or what's on TV right now. They have no connection to it. And so that's what we're dealing with. So I think all of a sudden when a burner phone shows up towards the middle of the book, and I think the cultural reference is like Conan O'Brien, the
what's his name? The dog, the puppet dog. Yeah.
Triumph the infant.
Triumph. That's it.
Yeah. Dog. It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, we're not in 1970 or something, but like, but yeah, that's what I always thought when I was writing this book. Yeah, I don't want to like beat people over the head with, here's where we are, here's the year, here's the temperature, here's the direction of the wind.
No, I love that. It reminded me of that guy Mark Fisher, who wrote a lot about music and technology and the slow cancellation of the future. And there's this other critic or intellectual, Simon Reynolds, who talked about hauntology, like art that kind of like deliberately, it's like set in a past that isn't the past. It's not like period piece. It's like the present, but it feels like the past. Like there's this movie Body Heat. But this book gave me that similar feeling where it's like we're in America, we know that, and it's but it's not important that we know who's president right now. And I think that's a cool place to work into, rather than being like, everything announcing what part of the Trump presidency we were in. Like you see, or like the pandemic novels that are all coming out now. There's something about being in some sort of late 20th century, early 21st century America, and we're going to investigate kind of like the big myths. I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been it's in every great book I've ever read, it's like, if it's not important to the character, I don't care if it's important to the reader.
Right.
If Kody and Teal don't give a shit about Bill Clinton or George W. Bush being president, then the reader, what does it matter to the reader either?
Right. Yeah. And the thing you said about Teal kind of like having the fantasy about Elvis being her father, and then Kody has his rodeo cowboy as his dad that he's never met. Something about like attaching yourself to a lineage that has some like prestige or hope in it. That struck me as like a very American fixation when things get tough.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I feel so bad for these kids, it's like, you start out, you start writing about them for a while, and it's like, the farther I get into the drafts of it, I just feel like worse and worse for them. I'm like, oh my God, these poor. And I'm happy when people tell me the book reads like a cartoon. I'm like, good. That's good. Yeah. Because like, to me, it really bums me out. Like all the, you spend so much time with them. You're like, oh man, the hard road these two have been on. I'm glad some people can read it and say, this reminded me of Looney Tunes or something. I'm like, awesome. Don't read it again. Don't do a second reading. It is Looney Tunes. That's cool. All right. Keep going, go read another book. It's fine. I honestly like that.
One thing I had to ask you about is it's a small spoiler here, so if you want to skip 30 seconds ahead, if someone's listening who's like obsessed with not having anything spoiled. But Kody ends up in Montana and is disillusioned when it doesn't live up to his fantasy. And part of that is his cowboy asshole mentor there turns out to be a fraud cowboy, and he's actually from Pawtucket the Bucket, Rhode Island, and he has Larry Bird jerseys in his closet. And I wondered how he ended up to be from Pawtucket, just because I get just automatically excited anytime I see any Rhode Island town mentioned in any novel I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the East Coast, and the East Coast to me is, it's Rhode Island. It might as well be New Jersey. It's the same place, pretty much.
Yeah,
and I love it there, and I love the culture of the people in Rhode Island. I think it's, when I've been to Providence, I'm like, always like, oh man, should I move up here? I'm not sure. My wife went to art school there in Rissy, and awesome. So I would go up there sometimes, and I really like Rhode Island. I like driving on I-95. How there's like, what's the Thurber's curve or whatever?
Yeah. The big curve, and then you see the skyline appears, and you got the big blue bug and the Providence and the river on your right. It's very scenic. I love that sweep, and you got all the strip clubs on the waterfront to the right there too. It's got a lot going on, that view, that big curve. Yeah,
and I like it up there. I like that it's not quite New England yet. It's still like it could be like New Jersey Junior. And I only say that because New Jersey's already Junior. I don't it's little. Yeah. These are two little places. I kind of feel like akin to like weird states in America like that. West Virginia. I love my trips to West Virginia. Not that I've extensively traveled there, but I don't know. I like something about these underdog states.
Yeah.
Mississippi. When I've been down to Mississippi, I've just been like, I like something about Mississippi. It's like such a strange, messed up place, just like Jersey, and every state is messed up.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like, why does this guy wind up living in Rhode Island? Well, honestly, it's probably the worst state to be from if you were going to be like a macho cowboy guy. I mean, maybe arguably Connecticut. I'm not sure.
I think Connecticut, you're softer, like that might
maybe,
be a little
but like, I think the reality of it is like whenever you get 45 minutes away from a metropolitan area, all of a sudden you're in the country.
That's true.
So, and people forget that,
Yeah.
they say that about New Jersey. They're like, and when I was a kid, I used to like really laugh at the people who thought they were country, who were from my area. They're Pineys. They were just people who loved, fishing and mudding and listening to country music, driving their four wheels out in the woods. And I was like, how can you be that way this close to New York City? When I was a kid, I understand it as soon as you get a little older, it's just like, oh man, so if you're like just 45 minutes away, an hour away from like big metropolitan area, all of a sudden you're in America. You're in like actual America where like real, I'm not saying real people
No,
versus
I know
like,
what you mean.
you're not real if you live in the city, but I'm just saying like, you know,
Yeah,
you disappear on the weekends into nature sometimes.
yeah.
But but anyway, so the guy's from Rhode Island because number one, it's funny. Number two, it's just like there used to be this commercial on TV when I was a kid. It was for like a certain salsa. I think it was paste salsa. It was like cowboys sitting around and they're like, where's the salsa from? And the guy's like, from New York City. The guy's like, New York City. It's like you couldn't have salsa from New York City, but you can't have like a real cowboy from Pawtucket, Rhode Island. It's like that same thing.
I like that.
The guy being from Queens is too on the nose, let's say.
Right. Pawtucket's like the same idea, but a little bit obscure. And the Larry Bird, secret Larry Bird jersey is a great touch too. I love that.
Yeah, he's got two of them.
Yeah. One for laundry day,
Yeah, I mean, it's like, all right, I can excuse you having one Larry Bird jersey.
Two.
You got two of them? And you got, what are his books? His books are Chicken Soup for the Cowboy's Soul.
Yeah.
He's got Dianetics and he has Tony Robbins. He has a Tony Robbins self-help book.
Yeah.
When you find that in your mentor's sock drawer.
Yeah, that's when you got to have a little moment of self-reflection. What are my real values here if I'm getting derivative Tony Robbins in my life?
But, the thing is too, like about that scene of like getting, it's like the authenticity doesn't really matter as much as, I think when you're young, it matters,
Right.
When you're young, it's like, oh, who was I to worship this person? They're not authentic. They're not pure enough. It's that purity test. But I think like other thing that's going on in that part is like the kid who's going through the hazing, he doesn't survive it, I mean, he's been abused so much like leading up to this that like of course he wouldn't be able to process it. But there's like this thing that happens when you enter into the workforce, this toxic thing, where like the other men kind of, they make a joke of you in the beginning and they put you through the ringer. And so Kody has to deal with all that and he doesn't handle it very well. But that was kind of something I wanted to look at and see, what's it like when you find out that the person hazing you and who you're like, oh, I'm not good enough for this person. And you find out that they're literally just a clown.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, as you grow older and like you start to become those people at a job site, and even if you're not a vicious piece of shit, you find out that most everybody is kind of a clown. And there's no such thing as authentic people. People play a character at work a lot of times.
Truly.
And so you kind of just start to like, it just becomes this other sideshow that happens in your life in the workplace. People have these like fantasy personas that they put on top of a fantasy persona for their profession.
Yeah, you got the one hat for work, the one hat for the family, the one hat for your spouse, like that. You can't escape performance. It doesn't mean there are no authentic moments, but there's a little performance involved.
Yeah, there is.
My last question for you is just because we were talking about work. You work heavy construction, and I'm just kind of curious about how you balance your writing life with it. Like, what your writing routine is like. If you're working on the way in. You said you wrote on your phone a lot, or if it's hard to imagine after a day of heavy construction you can sit down and pound away at the keyboard, but maybe you do.
Yeah, I do. I do. I come home and I try to do some more. I try to do just the whole time. I'm never really doing my best work ever,
Mm.
it seems. Until it's like, draft 10 of the thing where I'm finally like, all right, I'm gonna start doing good work now,
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, I do that job, but it's like it's just like any other job. You have your breaks.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, not everybody has breaks, but there's some breaks. There's coffee break, there's lunch break. And at the end of the day, there's a little bit of time when everybody fights their way out of the parking lot. So I sit and I mess around a little bit with something creative. And yeah, just a tiny, tiny bit of that adds up over time. But I found that I'm getting older and I have to come home now and like take a little nappy nap. And then I can get up and have a fresh brain again to like maybe retype something on my typewriter or something. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things. Everybody kind of does some version of this.
Yeah.
This is just, they talk about like people's writing processes. It's like nobody like goes out in the wilderness and like burns a ram's head, and then like some kind of like manuscript descends from like a silver line cloud.
Yeah.
Everybody just sits down and kind of like pecks away at something. But I get asked this question all the time. It's like, people ask me, they're like, all right, so how do I get a job in like heavy construction so I can do like, it's almost like they're gonna
Manly stuff.
It's not even manly. It's just like the job itself. It's not like it's manly. It's just the conditions are like hot and you work out in the rain and you work out in the freezing cold. And it's just like, it just sucks. I mean, but I just figured every job sucks. So whatever.
Yeah.
This was one that, I was like, I can go to school for free a little bit. And I learned how to weld and stuff for it. And I thought I have no interest in reading blueprints and things like that. So I was like, maybe if I start reading blueprints, it'll be good, because that seems like work, something you don't want to do. And the thing I really wanted to do was to write novels and things, which I figured it would be nice to do the opposite of what I was naturally inclined to do. So I could separate the two things in my mind,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but when I see when I look at a blueprint, I don't think to myself, wow, I'm going to do such a good job designing, not building this. Yeah, you build the thing, but you're not like, I did this, it's just like somebody, you have this thing you have to build, and it's like, it can only come together one way. Right. So now when I sit down, I do my creative work, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like unlimited opportunities. I can do whatever. It doesn't have to make sense. It can be sloppy and it can be crooked. And there's something nice about balancing your life in ways like that.
For sure. You're not using your juice at work. You save that juice. Yeah.
Using a different juice. Yeah. I'm solving problems all day and doing a lot of different kind of calculations, which are not poetic calculations.
Right.
I'm not poetically choosing rigging or poetically setting up the crane.
Love that. Well, thank you for taking the time, Bud. That was a lot of fun. Today's guest was Bud Smith, and we were discussing his novel Teenager. You can order a copy at skylitbooks.com or swing by the store and pick it up in person. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks again, Bud.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.